Hi, thank you for joining us here at the studio at Fred TV, Fall River Educational Television at Durfee High School. I'm Pamela Martin, and I am joined by decorated war veteran Christopher Azevedo. In 2018, Christopher was named the New Bedford Transition House for Veterans Veteran of the Year. Congratulations, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
And of course, for your service to our country.
Thank you very much.
I understand that we're here to talk about PTSD, mainly,
Sure.
but what got you here, Chris, is you've decided to share your story.
Yes.
And in the beginning, when we were talking in the office, you said to me that really no topic is off the table with you.
That's correct.
That shame, that embarrassment,
Yep.
that fear, whether it's your courage
Yeah.
or also your intelligence at this point and acceptance of your role as a man is out the window.
That's correct.
All right.
Nothing
So-
gets better without talking about it. That's how I look at it.
I love that, right? We've brought books that we want to
Sure.
also recommend after, not only to veterans, but to people who suffer from PTSD.
Correct.
I think what's most interesting and which is finally coming to light, we've known for years that this is called the hidden wound, the
Sure.
hidden injury.
Yes.
We're able to see when a vet is walking with a cane or needs a service dog or is blinded. What happened to you when you were hit by an IED? You suffered traumatic brain damage, but
Yes.
also injuries to your upper body, chest, and spine.
Yeah, deep chest wall trauma, 2 herniated discs, cervical, 4 lumbar, and a broken vertebrae in my lower back. Yep.
Do you remember this?
Oh yeah, I remember it happening. I do. I blacked out for probably 30 seconds during the initial head strike. I basically broke a 3.5-inch bulletproof glass window on the vehicle when the IED went off on the right side, and I hit my head on the windshield, chest into the steering wheel, knee into the radio box of the vehicle.
Tell us the city that happened and what was your mission at that time? I don't want to ever say that every day is a normal day for a soldier, but you still have a mission.
Sure.
And there's a roadmap for how you're going to complete it.
Correct.
It
So
just
this
changes.
was in Samara, Iraq, on what they call alternate supply route Golden, which was a supply route the Army would shut down, and every 30 to 60 days they would open it up to divert traffic to go through that way. But the problem is we never had enough manpower in order to keep the roads safe, meaning eyes on at all times. So the enemy would go in on the time when the Army pulled away, and they would just lay IEDs throughout the road. We got tasked. Our main job as a LURS team, long range surveillance and reconnaissance, was to basically, with sniper interdiction, watch these road junctures and take out targets of opportunity if somebody was getting caught digging or placing bombs in the road. And we were going out on a recon to do a 3-day mission set in this area, and we ended up getting hit directly in a complex ambush. So basically, always tough to talk about. So they basically initiated an IED attack and a firefight afterwards. Probably lasted, when you're in it, it seems like forever, but it probably lasted 3 to 5 minutes.
Wow.
Maybe. I'm not even, I don't know. But it seemed like 3 to 5 minutes, possibly. But it seemed longer than that, obviously, you know.
And you were taken out and you were treated, but
I refused treatment, actually, believe it or not.
okay,
I
how?
stayed,
How do you do that, Chris?
because I was a small unit operator, we had different rules of engagement and stuff. I drove out of the contact area. After the firefight was done, we checked all men and equipment. We realized my vehicle was deadlined. We had no access to bring the vehicle back, so I basically drove a vehicle with three flat tires, broken windshield, broken turret and main gun for another 3 hours as we patrolled trying to find the perpetrators. And I started having intense headaches right away. They asked me if I wanted to be treated, told me they would fly me out. I refused to. 4 days later, suffering intense headaches, vomiting, didn't eat for 4 days, didn't sleep for 4 days. After that incident, our combat medic was like, you need to be treated. And I says, okay, what's the process? And he told me that, well, we're gonna take you to medical. He goes, you'll get flown down to Baghdad. Baghdad, you'll go to Ramstein. Ramstein, you'll fly to Walter Reed. And I refused, again, because I didn't want to leave my team, so.
But is this how we treat our veterans?
Well, you know, it was probably a poor decision on my part.
I was going to say.
And leadership probably should have forced me to go out to be treated.
Yes.
Because at that
Yes.
time, we understood that the more rapid intervention with TBI, the better the health outcome. But obviously, I was very emotionally involved. Like I said, I basically served with 6 to 12 guys. out of a 56-man unit. So most of the time I was with just 6 guys every day. That's how we ran, 72-hour mission sets for the most part. And I didn't want to leave my team. I really, at this point, we had lost people in neighboring units. You already start to have survivor's guilt. And I didn't, if something would have happened to my team and I was back home, I wouldn't be able to live with that. So I stayed, and that was it.
Okay, because I'm picturing the coach, right? You know, put me in coach, and you're staying in even though you've had the concussion.
Yeah.
And TBI, as we said, is traumatic brain injury for folks who are just kind of getting onto this. But you knew you were in trouble, though. If you're going 3 days after that kind of an injury, vomiting, unable to sleep, unable to eat, you're trained to do that, right? We're trained that no one is left behind, and I'm proud to say that in this country, we do as much as we can to bring home our MIA and our POWs.
Yes.
More could always be done, Chris.
Sure.
More can always be done. But it's emotional when you see some of these great grandchildren welcoming their dads home from World War I. The bodies, what little remains we found. It's a proud tradition that 1% of our population supports and looks out for 99% of our population here in the United States.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So you finally knew you were in trouble, okay?
I did.
Finally, after 4 days, that thick skull said, I need help. And you were medically treated. But what was that PTSD when you came back home? Because you told me before the interview that you really lost. When we talk about rock bottom, and I know it's difficult for you to talk about, and until people have been there.
Sure. Yeah, so I come back home. I think I was already suffering what's called combat neurosis or combat stress. I hadn't yet had an official diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, but my relationship was already affected. My marriage was failing. My relationship with my children, and I now know, many years later, seeing kids injured at war, it made it very difficult to deal with my own children. Hearing kids screaming or arguing, The thing is once you know you don't understand you have PTSD, but what happens is your hypervigilance and your startle response, and you instantly just go back. The fight or flight response kicks right back in, and you go from 0 to 150 miles an hour. Your anger level, your perception, everything changes, and it takes a while to attune to that and understand that it's happening. So when you first come home, you kind of just, you explode. You have a very short temper. Flashbacks, first flashback I ever experienced, my daughter at the time was at an indoor soccer field, and it's a metal building, which called a Morton building. They're all over Iraq. So, and they have nets inside this soccer building, and they're kicking the soccer ball, and the net protects the soccer ball from hitting the wall. Well, when they were kicking the soccer ball, part of the net fell down. And I thought nothing of it, and I'm sitting there talking to 2 other mothers with their kids playing soccer, and the soccer ball keeps hitting the wall. Thud, thud, thud. And at the same time, because Otis Air Force Base is in line with New Bedford Airport, there were 2 Blackhawks flying by. They, the pilots get their hours. They were doing touch and goes, and then they fly back to Otis. That thud's going off. And at the same time, I hear the helicopters, and I instantly had a flashback. And I wasn't there. And I was back in Iraq, and to me, I was next to the flight line where they bring in wounded. And the thud was the paladins, the motorized gunnery, shooting out into the towns in Iraq. And that's what I heard. And I woke up to one of the mothers grabbing my arm. And she's asking me, "Are you all right?" And I instantly got embarrassed, obviously. I didn't know what happened. First time I ever experienced that. And I literally ran out of the indoor soccer field to my truck. And 10 minutes later, my daughter runs behind me, and she's asking me, what's wrong? And I couldn't tell her. I didn't understand at the time that was my first flashback. And then I started to understand. And, I started going to the VA and to other therapists to get help because I understood something was wrong. And I was more affected by that second tour of duty than I thought I would have been.
Yeah, I want to be clear that you re-enlisted after 9/11.
I did. I was a firefighter in the city of New Bedford.
A firefighter. You worked as a prison guard in a maximum security unit.
Yep, prior to that, yes.
So you re-enlisted after 9/11.
I came back in on a program during the start of the war, which was called Try One for the Guard. The National Guard was recruiting. So I signed up for a 1-year contract, and I ended up staying for 6. I never took a re-enlistment bonus. Didn't want it. It's not why I went in. And, my second year there, I willingly volunteered for duty in Iraq with my unit and deployed and left.
That's when it all went downhill.
Yeah, on the return home.
I also know that different veterans we've talked to over the years, they will only sit like this, their backs to the wall,
Yeah.
right? They're not comfortable in a restaurant. It's instinctive that when they go to the movies or a theater, they're always watching out for the egress areas. So I know that, having come from a family of many veterans, that there are signs we look for. And I also know that we experience with that self-medication. I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about how it is that, like you said, a generational. PTSD now is not just the man or woman that returned from war. Your
Correct.
daughter was there. Affected, going, what's wrong with Daddy? Daddy's cheering for me, and then Daddy's running away in tears.
Yeah, no family that of any serious consequence, so any long-term marriage, relationship, 2 dads, 2 moms, mom and dad, dad and mom, whoever the deployed person is, it doesn't matter. They come back home, the alterations, the changes in cognition and behavior start to unfold, the family sees it, and the family is most definitely, if they stay for any length of time with that service person, start to suffer secondary underlying conditions at the hand of the primary sufferer. They do. It's pervasive, it's real, more of it's just being understood now. So if a family gets divorced, sadly, and that's why I work so hard with local veterans, I try and help veterans and their families stay together, use certain tools. How do you reintegrate back into society or with your family to a healthy norm, and to have your kids and your wife or your husband understand what's going on and how to help them better cope and manage. Because without that, you end up not just losing the veteran, you lose the family too. So if the family gets divorced, that woman or that husband doesn't go on to find another person who was never in the military and all of a sudden have a normal life. Because most of the time, now all of a sudden, they're explosive. Their kids are reactive to certain things because they spent so much time, under the same roof, the same household with that person who served, who was suffering. Diesel fuel is still triggering to me, smelling diesel fuel sometimes. And if that happens and then dad runs out of the house, or dad has a moment where the door gets slammed or the kid drops something on the floor, he instantly goes back. I've had friends tell me that their wife dropped something off the counter. It hit the floor, and the next thing you know, they were on the floor as if they were being shot at. And then they get up because they realize you're not at war, you're in your kitchen at home, and they flip out and they start screaming, and they're angry because they're angry at themselves that they can't stop the reaction. That sympathetic autonomic reaction that happens. And that's why they call it part of the autonomic system. You have no control over it, over those mechanisms in your body. That fight or flight response, once it's brought to that level, it's almost like it's broken. And that therein lies where PTSD comes, that hyper response. Your body instantly, at any feeling of danger, your body starts to shunt blood from your organs. They go to your heart, your respirations increase, your vision gets better, you become physically stronger. And I know in myself, I get major GI issues. If I get upset, if I have an argument, if somebody cuts me off in traffic, or I get scared, or almost, something my body perceives as dangerous, I will instantly start sweating. And then after that, when my body goes back down, I end up with chronic diarrhea, honestly, and all these major GI issues, which is many veterans may not report it to others, but when you talk to them, the same thing is happening.
That's why, again, when I was on the phone with you and we were speaking, I really, my gosh, we talked for a while, almost an hour, right?
Yeah, we did.
And you were so honest about saying, I don't want anything off the table. So
correct.
We've talked with guys from Pearl Harbor, and they still, those decades past, have that guarded edge with me.
Absolutely.
On December 7th and D-Day, and they have that guarded edge. And I think maybe you're the person that's breaking that stigma. People like you who are finally saying, I'm here to help those younger guys. I want you to join this agency. You're saving marriages, Chris.
Nobody, and I get it. As a combat veteran, no one can truly understand what you went through, right?
Right.
A lot of people have seen the movie The Green Mile. I often wish, and I write about it in my notes someday, maybe I'll finish a book about it.
Yeah.
I wish I had the capacity to touch somebody and allow them to see what it was like, what you go through, and what that does to you, and how it is, and that return home, and the effects it has on you. I lost most of my friends, family members, lost another marriage, lost my children, lived in my truck for a little while. Like I basically lost everything through addiction, and then I started seeking help with a home-based program in Boston, which was tremendous. Mass General Hospital helped me out. The brain injury clinic there, Dr. Seth Herman, tremendous individual, and I eventually knew I had to go away, and I ended up looking for clinics or inpatient programs, and Dan Nadu from the local vet center was able to get me a slot, and I went away for 2.5 months to the Western VA Healthcare, and I honestly believe, I get emotional again, I believe it saved my life. I really do. And there's the old saying, knowledge is power, and it's not power. Knowledge is potential power, right? If you don't take that knowledge and give it to somebody else and teach it and push it forward, then it does nothing. It
stays
dies
in your box.
Correct. It dies with that person. So I'm exposing myself. It's emotional. It's still difficult. 20 years later, there's times I can talk about this stuff. I can talk about loss. I can talk about friends who passed away, and I'm okay. And there are other times I'll just basically crawl into a hole. I do, and I start getting very introverted. But I fight it, and I want people to know, to the best of my ability, to convey in language what it's like and why this has happened, and maybe it helps another family stay together, or a person stop feeling guilty and go seek services and get the help they need.
And just to be clear, you have a medical background. You're studying psychology.
I'm in my clinical master's right now.
You haven't stopped going to school.
And I was a pre-med, but my age is starting to be a problem when I spoke to some medical directors.
You're as old as you feel, right? But but Chris, so you're not only speaking from, let's say, the first person, but you're speaking from the textbook knowledge too.
Correct. Absolutely.
Right. So when you talk about the physical and the GI issues that arise from high stress, anger, flashbacks, you're also speaking from a clinical.
Absolutely. From medical books about this, from research, numerous research papers that are all been peer reviewed, in some incredible books that are out by medical doctors and other clinicians and psychiatrists with their experience with trauma victims and with combat veterans and PTSD and what they see.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about, well, let's take a quick moment and just go through the books.
Sure.
Because I also like the fact that when we talk about PTSD, I want to make it really clear that it can affect anybody. It can affect a kid that saw their mom or dad beaten or robbed.
Absolutely.
A car crash survivor.
Yeah,
that
plane, train crash. Obviously, probably more prevalent in society is women and sexual trauma victims and abuse, and domestic violence within the household. Sadly, those are some of the highest numbers. But, I'm on the board of EAP. I help the city of New Bedford still, even though I'm retired, with fire, police, and EMS for any traumas or car accidents or things they may have to help them deal with it, hangings. So, we have emergency staff, police, fire, EMS. Also, you see trauma every day. Not every call you go to has a good outcome. Sometimes people are dying. And, most people don't want to talk about it, but trauma is cumulative. It's layered. It gets internalized. It's put away. You can't shut off a horrible car accident where an entire family dies. You can't go to a gang shooting where 3 children are dead and pretend it doesn't affect you. You can't be a medic and go to a call where a baby chokes and you are unable to save that baby. You do at some point internalize that, and it comes out and it affects you. So again, it's a matter of researching, talking about it, finding good texts on the subject matter, and how do we convey this to people to help them, and start doing utilizing positive coping mechanisms.
Well, we're going to have a whole resource list at the end.
Okay, sure.
Numbers people can call locally, your book recommendations. I also liked how, when you and I talked about it, it's almost as if managing your PTSD, your trauma, is the same as managing heart disease. diabetes.
Absolutely.
It has to be a daily work.
The days that I get on my bike and I spin for 10 minutes, not even for exercise, just to get my heart rate up, get some
Yep.
blood going, and then I sit on the floor and stretch. I actively meditate or pray, listen to like spa music. You know, what you do with the first half an hour of your day will win the day. Whatever you spend with the first moments of your day is how it sets the course for the rest of your day. It really does. It's that vitally important. Or even doing some writing therapy, even if you pen a few things down, is
I like
vitally
that writing
important.
therapy.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
So that's the key to being happy. I mean, we're going to end this on a good note, right? That's
Sure.
the key to
Absolutely.
saying,
Yeah. No, this isn't
I'm
a
gonna-
doomsday
No,
story. Like you
no.
know, I myself, and it made amazing progress, and I've seen other people I've worked with that have withstood horrible, horrible traumas, you know, both at war and you know, just through life and stuff, and they are doing. Does that mean every day is perfect? No, it doesn't.
No.
But they are for the most part happy, you know, hopeful, and they're thriving. You know, this is one of the things. There's a difference between surviving and thriving. And most of us come home, sadly, and all we're doing is surviving, which is barely getting by. You know, how do you get that veteran from the point of surviving to the point where they're thriving and they're actually successful and they get to experience happiness and joy?
Well, Chris, you must, I know you do, completely believe in the volunteer. You know, it's not always the income, like we were talking about.
Correct.
It's that outcome. And you've put together an entire network. I can call, oh my gosh, Chris, I know a friend who's suffering. You might not have all the answers. No one does.
Nobody does.
But, Chris, you know, it's kind of like that invisible telephone line when we were kids, right?
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
You put everybody together and you
Sure.
find the box that this person can help another person with, regardless of the trauma.
That's correct.
As you said, it may be a child, it may be a woman who survived an assault.
Sure.
So I know that speaking with you, you're a helper, and that's what I always try to instill in myself and with my kids.
I was in a psych class, and the doctor asked, you like doing this? You like doing this? Who here volunteers? You know, when he was going like that, he goes, you like doing that, right? And everyone's like, yeah, it makes you feel good. He goes, it's selfish. And he wasn't trying to say that you're selfish,
yeah.
but psychologically, it's selfish because what happens is you're feeding yourself. It's that powerful. So giving back, not only are you helping somebody be successful or blessing them, or it could help them do anything, where you're helping yourself.
Yeah,
If more people understood that by helping and giving back, and like you said, not everything is about, you can't, our time is the most valuable thing we have. We can't get back
We
5
can't
minutes
get
from
back
now.
time.
I chose to do this because I felt there was value in it. Everything isn't about money. It really isn't. And there are things that are more valuable that in sharing and helping people experience joy and happiness is probably one of the most powerful things that we could potentially be doing, you know? I don't like to see people suffer, basically. I don't. That's why peer helper is huge now.
Yeah,
So it's basically at the lowest level. You're not a psychologist, you're not a psychotherapist, you don't have tons of official training, but you learn some motivational interviewing. You learn how to be a good listener, an effective listener. And a lot of the people, if you're someone who has lived experience, what better than somebody who's already suffered some type of trauma or addiction, and they're in recovery, and they're well into recovery. I mean, not like yesterday, but they have like 24 months banked recovery. They haven't used, they're learning these management tools. They're actively studying, reading, going to yoga. What better person to help someone who's suffering than somebody who was actually in the trenches at one point in time, and maybe they've lost their family and they were homeless, they lived in their truck or under an overpass, and now they're doing well, they're holding down a job, they have a home, maybe you have your family back, maybe you have another family.
Right.
But the whole thing is that things change sometimes and you can do well. Your old life isn't necessarily what you're going to get back, but it's a matter of showing people that you can go forward and still have a good, productive life.
Go quick, briefly through, if you would, Chris. We've
Sure.
got a couple of good books, and
This book here is more like a maintenance manual just for veterans.
Okay.
It's more medical. It's more difficult to understand some of the language in it, but I think anyone can read it. But if you're into treating veterans or you have a family member that's a veteran, I think that's a really good book. Gives you some background. This is a tremendous book. This has nothing to, not specifically on veterans, but this book here, written by a Boston-based doctor, just dealing with trauma, childhood trauma, rape victims, domestic violence, and combat veterans, and it's just unbelievably powerful to hear some of the stories in here. And in this book, by a medical doctor, proof that pharmacology isn't always the answer. Meditation, yoga, EMDR therapy, exercise, and peer-to-peer is huge on that. This book here by Dr. Hodge, pretty tremendous book. This gentleman here was a military doctor who never served. He willingly, I don't know how he did this, I heard he had asked a general, someone higher up than him, and had to get permission from the Pentagon, and he literally, even though there are doctors in Iraq, his job to volunteer to go to Iraq was not to take care of patients. He literally went to Iraq and embedded himself with infantry soldiers to understand what they go through on a daily basis. So this doctor was actually in combat with these infantrymen. He came back home, and 6 months to a year later, he asked the Army permission to go back to Iraq, now with the Marines, with riflemen, so he could understand what happened to the Marines and their experience.
Wow.
And then he came back home, first account, and he wrote this book, and it's pretty
Just
tremendous.
so many good people, right?
Yeah, and this book right here by Cynthia Orange, incredible book. Her main suffering came secondary from her husband, who was a Vietnam veteran, but sadly, in the course of this, she herself was attacked and suffered a brutal crime and a rape. And after that, she basically got educated, and she ended up eventually writing this book. Tremendous, tremendous book, Shockwaves. Just great, great stuff.
Well, I think I have my reading set up for, I love to read, as you and I talked about, right? And yoga and meditation.
Yeah.
And I really want people to seek out those natural healings.
I never went into this thinking I'm going to be a veteran's helper or a veteran's therapist. That's not what the aim was. The aim was initially to fix myself.
Right.
And through talking and learning these tools, I'm like, this is too good not to share. So next thing you know, my phone starts ringing. People from, one friend to another friend who knows someone, in the military, next as far as Maine to Florida.
Yeah, you said there were people all over the nation.
And as far out as Missouri, I had people calling me. And I would stay on the phone with them and talk to them and give them tools. And I'm friends with a lot of these people on Facebook. We still maintain contact. And like I said, I went to the program and I learned all this stuff. And the next thing you know, I'm like, I think this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. You have the capacity to save somebody's life. And it doesn't mean you're running into a burning building or you're getting in the way of gunfire. You could save their life literally by just being friendly and showing them for the first time true empathy and that somebody does care. And that's quite powerful. And who knows where that goes.
Just
from
kindness.
There. Yeah, absolutely. I believe that.
Just kindness. I think that's a good lesson to end this on. And I thank you for your service, as do we all here in the South Coast. So
thank you.
Be well, Chris, and I know this won't be the last time that someone reaches out, at least not for me. I know people will be reaching out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The following are Christopher Azevedo's suggested resources. Treating PTSD in military personnel. The body keeps the score. Once a warrior, always a warrior. Shockwaves. Websites and hotlines. Emotional support and suicide prevention hotline. Call or text 988 for the Veterans Crisis Line, then press 1. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-TALK or 1-800-273-8255. Online at suicidepreventionlifeline.org.